Okay, my name is Father Jerome Kodell. My job right now is to be editor of our monastic newspaper and to work in development that is furthering the goals of the Abbey. And I work a lot in the carpentry shop doing wood crafts and other things, repairs for the community. We're talking about the monastic profession, the Benedictine profession, which goes back to the rule of Benedict. St. Benedict lived in the 6th century and he wrote the rule in the middle of the 500s. So it's a 1,500-year-old, 1,400-year-old rule. Now, it has three parts, the profession of the Benedictines: obedience, stability, and conversatio morum. Obedience and stability are English words, and so we have some reference, but conversatio morum is Latin, and it's sort of a shorthand for something that means the monastic way of life, and particularly the monastic way of life in this particular community. But the separation of vows as independent ideas does not belong to this period. This is very early, and the separation of vows didn't take place until about 1,000 years later, and with the development of the more modern orders. And so what obedience, stability, and conversatio is doing, it's giving a global idea of the life. Obviously, obedience has to be number one because it's obedience to God, in which the monk believes he has been drawn. But the whole life is meant to bring interior freedom. It might seem to be bringing restriction, but it's bringing freedom. There's a difference between freedom and liberty, which are often confused, that liberty is an external thing, external quality. If you're at liberty, you're free to move around. You're out, not in jail. But you may be at liberty and not be free, because you may be driven by passions or interior pressures and even exterior pressures that you haven't identified. And you can be in jail and be free, because you are interiorly, you've gotten there because of doing something which you thought was right, and maybe the government thought was wrong. Now, obedience is to a human superior who is not believed to be God or even to have superhuman powers, but is simply the designated one, the one elected to represent God in the community. And he has to be always guided by the rule. He cannot act outside of just on his own whim. And so the threefold profession gives the monk some protection. For example, if with a vow of stability, a monk cannot be assigned just to live outside the monastery for no good reason. It has to be within the meaning and the context of his profession. Or if you live in a community which has a very loose idea of silence, the abbot is not free to make you, by yourself, observe a very strict rule of silence. So he is under supervision by the rule and by the community as well. But the whole purpose, as I said, is to give the monk a context in which he can keep his promises, and that will make him free. We all know how hard it is how easy it is to make a promise and then, over the time, to fail to keep it. But the monastery brings people in to make a free expression of what they want to do. Nobody is forcing a monk to make vows. When he makes them, he is saying, I want to live this way, and I trust that this life will give me the context to be able to carry out what I profess. And in that way, I will be fulfilling the will of God. So it's very hopeful, a path toward freedom. And that's really the purpose of why we're here, to achieve freedom as children of God, to be obedient to God through a human superior who is not God, but who takes the place of God. And it takes a lot of faith to believe that, but the whole life is one of faith.